And here we are. Another church chat day.
Woohoo!
And
Whoop.
here comes our theme music. Ah, there it is.
It's church chat with Pastors Dan and Dave. Come hang out with us on our stream. It's Church Chat Wednesday.
It is Church Chat Wednesday, and I am Pastor Dan.
And I'm Pastor Dave.
And over there on the keys, Mr. Broke Down Freeman Blues himself, James Adkins.
Hi there.
James, I want you to know, I didn't tell you this yet, but I saw the logo on your case. I downloaded your album the other day.
Oh, man.
I needed some summertime listening music, and it felt appropriate.
Heck yeah. I'm going to make like a fraction, maybe 3/4 of a penny on that.
Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome. But yeah, I saw that. I was like, oh, I'm going to download that. Just why not?
Nevertheless, I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome.
Was it on Spotify?
I don't know. I got it on iTunes.
Oh, I might have made like $1 from that.
Hey, well, good. If that's $1 in your pocket, you'll get that $1 check from Apple Music or however that happens.
Don't forget the influence that this show has.
Oh, that's true. Now that people know that it's out there, you can probably retire.
Coffee's on me, guys.
Oh man, excellent.
This coffee is pretty good.
The coffee's actually usually you make us coffee, whether we're nice to you or not.
And it's always good, but today it's like
It's exceptional,
Yeah.
right?
You don't know what's in it when you're not nice to me, though.
Fair. Is it the coffee that? How do they do that? They like feed it to
The monkeys.
the monkey, and then.
But I don't clean it very well.
Anyway, speaking of food, our guest today is Paul Hade, right?
Yep.
Yep. Who is the operations manager of Chick-Fil-A here
Lord's
in
Chicken.
Finley. That's Jesus's chicken here in
Here's
Finley.
what I want to know is if that's the Lord's chicken, what is the devil's chicken?
Ooh,
You know, what would be the polar opposite?
I'm going to say Zaxby's.
Or Lee's.
No, it can't be Lee's. Lee's is the purgatory of chicken. I think we all know that.
What about Popeyes?
Lee's is like excellent.
No, Lee's is very good. We had Lee's just the other day. Holly was very excited. It was Monday, and she won't mind me telling the story probably. But she had a day off because one of our kids was getting braces, and so she wanted to be there to take her to the orthodontist and everything. And she said, "I'll be home." She's like, "I'm going to make a nice dinner." Also taking dinner to my brother and his wife who just had a baby, and like that's great idea. So she had like this ham she was gonna make, and then she was gonna make some Jello for Renee because she got braces and her mouth hurt, and then she was gonna make I forget what else. There's brownies, bread, all this other stuff. Like just go all out. 0 things turned out. And we had Lee's chicken,
Nice.
which was fine. It was excellent.
Well, now-
it's one of those days. We all have those days where it's just like, you know what? Today won and I lost.
Now is the time of year that's very special for Lee's because they bring out the fish, and their fish is excellent.
Oh, excellent. What kind of fish is it? I don't know.
And it kind of swims.
But it's not
The
like a
kind that's
catfish
delicious.
special or a Lake Erie perch or something like that. It's just like
I'm going to guess
cod.
red speckled cod.
I'm going to guess tilapia.
Yeah, that could be. Tilapia?
Tilapia.
Tilapia?
Yeah, sure. It's
I've
goldfish.
Heard it both ways.
And speaking of Lee's, my boy who has worked there since he was a freshman in high school, is now on his way out. He got offered a job at Airgas. So he's been a manager at Lee's.
Okay.
Worked his way through high school at Lee's, and
He's really graduated from the chicken game, and he's
he's ready. He will no longer be a chicken technician.
chicken technician. What's a step up from a chicken technician? Is it colonel? Is that what you go to
That's
as
what
you
I would
climb
think.
the ladder in the chicken game?
Colonel is clearly the top of the ladder.
I think so. You can't ever make general in the fried chicken world. I don't think colonel is the pinnacle of where
Well,
you go.
Sanders
General So.
Oh, you got
would-
General So. So
would-
General So, does he outrank Colonel Sanders?
in my book.
Wow. I had never put two and two together. I guess now we know. There really needs to be a hierarchy chart out there somewhere. I think outranking all of them is Jesus's chicken. So, Chick-fil-A wins in the ranking game.
You have to say that because your daughter works there.
My daughter now works there. Now, this was not collusion. Just because he's a church chat guest, didn't mean he had to hire her. It would have made today awkward.
Yeah.
But, Adeline did have her training yesterday, and so she'll be starting next week.
Well,
She's starting at a fast food restaurant on St. Patrick's Day. I don't know how. I don't know.
Well, it's not like she's working at Logan's or something,
Right. It's a little bit different.
Logan's is good.
It's not Irish chicken.
Yeah, no green chicken or anything.
No, I don't think so. If you have green chicken, you should send it back.
Shakes.
By the way, Logan's does not sell green chicken.
Yeah. If it's green, send it back. Don't eat that, please. Something that happened. I think we've got some time before he comes on. So I want to. I don't know if you saw this news or not. You know what? I want to wait. I want to save this. I want to say because this is going to be a longer discussion. I think. So we'll see.
Is it sad news? Happy news?
No, it's of theological interest.
Okay.
In which case, it could go on for a little while. So I'm going to pull it back to something else. I'm going to go back to the Chick-fil-A thing. So because I posted about, we knew we were going to be talking about Chick-fil-A today with the operations manager here in Findlay, I posted a video from a Christian comedian, singer, songwriter, entertainer.
My favorite.
It is Tim Hawkins, who sings a song to the tune of the Beatles' Yesterday called Chick-fil-A. And I find the song amusing. I think it's funny. And I appreciated that. Now, that's as far as my opinions go on Tim Hawkins and his music and his jokes and the like. Dave, I think you have stronger opinions.
I think you're trying to get me fired is what
I'm not. There's nothing. Your feelings, positive or negative, of Tim Hawkins. From what I know, he hasn't been canceled for any reason. I don't think there's any like statement or anything like that we're making by saying Tim Hawkins is or is not funny. But why, Dave? Why do you have such strong feelings? I will just say this.
Number one, I think he's the Weird Al Yankovic of Christian stuff. I mean, and that's not my cup of tea.
It's not your thing. Okay, that's fine. Hey, teach their own.
But then, to the story, there was a time when I took my wife, and I think it was for Mother's Day or something. Steve Shaparsky and I took our wives to go out to dinner, and then Tim Hawkins was there.
Mm-hmm. He wasn't at dinner.
No, we went to the show.
You went to the show.
Right.
Okay.
And he came on. He did an hour. And then after his hour, he introduced another comedian who did a half an hour. Great. Perfect.
And that would have been a good time to go home.
Right. But come on out to the lobby and check out our merch while we take an intermission.
It was too long.
It was a hostage situation. We had, after we got back to our seats, it was another hour.
Yeah. You got to leave people wanting more.
Yes.
Right. Not just empty the tank and say, here's everything.
Nobody could put on a 2-hour stand-up show.
I mean,
unless you're sure you're never going to come see him again.
The best comedians, of which I would say that's a genre you put him in, as comedian. The best comedians, if they can do an hour special, it's usually closer to 45 minutes. The best ones can just nail it for an hour.
Right. But Heidi and Michelle are rolling.
That is a unique level of individual who can just a solid hour. If you've got a tight 5 minutes or a tight 10 or 15 minutes as a comedian, you're happy. Like that's fantastic. but to have that much, and so what you're saying is 2.5 hours.
A little long.
There's things that could have hit the cutting room floor, and it would have been.
And Michelle are rolling, laughing in tears, and I'm cramping up like everywhere because I've been in a seat, but I drove, so I couldn't ditch them.
So we have a great lineup of guests coming up. Adam Hamilton was originally going to be this week. We switched him around. He's going to be next week. Pastor at Church of the Resurrection, author of the book Simon Peter that we've been studying at church. Really, really excited to have him. And then we have several that are lined up. I feel like what needs to happen is we reach out to Tim Hawkins' people. And I think that you guys need to have a conversation about this. I don't like seeing you have negative feelings towards a fellow believer, and I want you guys to work this out.
To hash it out on.
I want you guys to work this out on church chat.
Matthew 15 right here on.
Can we please do this? Can we get Tim Hawkins on here?
I'm afraid somehow he'd make a song about me too.
There's no doubt in my mind that he would, which only makes me want to hear more. And I think it could be absolutely incredible. So,
speaking of songs, he does the Chick-Fil-A song, and I think the Chick-Fil-A, our guy might be on.
We're ready. Yeah.
Are we ready? All right.
Let me just, I'll make it so you guys can hear him.
All right.
You guys,
Tell us
it's
when
my
ready.
job to bring him in. You guys always beat me.
Bring him in, James.
I
Introduce
just
him.
wanted to change the topic.
All right, we got our guest here.
All right.
Hey, Paul.
Hey guys, how are you doing today?
Good. Hey, this is Dan, and I'm here with Dave, and thanks for coming on with us today. So you are, let me get it right. You're the operations manager at the Findlay Chick-fil-A. Is that right?
Well, I'm the owner-operator.
Owner-operator. I don't want to shortchange you. So, excellent. Well, thanks again for being on. I think we just need to get this out of the way right now. Just go. My daughter Adeline just had her training yesterday. Is going to be starting with you on next. I think a week from today is her first day. So we're very excited about that. How much free chicken can I expect her to be coming home with on a daily basis?
Well, she'll come home with some because she'll get a meal every time she's in there. I don't know. But maybe we can make something happen.
Yeah, as pastor, I just feel like she should tithe 10% of her chicken in some way. We'll try to see what we can make happen.
She'll save you one of her 12-count nuggets.
There
I
you
guess
go.
It'd be 2. She doesn't want to shortchange you.
Absolutely. That sounds perfect.
Well, I would say the guy who threw her your way should get some kickback, but you already take care of my group of youth pastors that meet once a month.
Yeah, that's very cool.
So
tell us a little bit about how did you kind of get started with Chick-fil-A, and you guys haven't been in Findlay all that long. What's that story been like?
Yeah, so for me, I really never saw myself really working in food service. Actually, I kind of was introduced to Chick-fil-A in high school. I got a job at a pet store, and across the way was a Chick-fil-A. Actually, fun fact, I got that job at a pet store because I did a Steve Irwin impression in like a group interview. It was crazy. But it was kind of a stressful job, and my brother actually worked at the pet store as well, and he said, hey, like there's this great place to get food called Chick-fil-A. There weren't a lot in Ohio really at the time. I think this was like 2005, 2006, and so I went over to the restaurant. I had the food, and the food was amazing. And so I just kept going back, and eventually I started to dine inside, and I was like, oh my gosh, like they just treat you differently here, like they just made you feel like $1 million. And so it was like a little vacation every time I got to go into the restaurant. But I didn't know anything really about the background of the organization or anything like that. Like I was just a huge fan. And so I tell people eventually I kind of turned into like a Billy Graham style evangelist for Chick-fil-A, which was, I was just telling everyone at the time, oh, you've never eaten at Chick-fil-A? Well, let me tell you. And I'd tell them how great it was. But still like never thought about really pursuing a career or even working there. And so that was when I was in high school. I go off to college. And then I think it was like my freshman year, my mom read an article that it was only a like $5,000 investment at the time, now $10,000 to get your own franchise. And that piqued my interest because I'd always wanted to own my own franchise, but obviously like that's kind of unattainable. For example, McDonald's, you have to have a net worth of $1 million, I think, and then you have to find the land, build the building. Not something really I would be able to get into, but also that wasn't a brand that I had interest in. And so I learned a little bit more about the business then. And then in between my freshman and sophomore year, I started to date my wife. And then during the fall of that next year, I went to her apartment, and outside was a cow car. Some of the franchisees used to do like the, you know, how you see vehicle wraps. It had cow spots on it. I go inside and I'm like, and there's a cow car out there. I love Chick-fil-A. Oh my gosh. There's, you know what I mean? Some Chick-fil-A owner somewhere around here. And she's like, I know, Paul, relax. I was giving her my whole spiel about how I love Chick-fil-A. And then she tells me her roommate was going on a date with a guy who owns a Chick-fil-A. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So I met this guy, Patrick. He was 26 years old, owned his own restaurant. But I was too like starstruck at the time to really like talk much. It's like meeting LeBron James or something. It's like, this is so cool. But really didn't think about asking him any questions until a few weeks later. And I was like, I walked into the Chick-fil-A by my high school and found out that's where he was the owner operator. So I called him up and said, hey, Patrick, would you be willing to sit down and just tell me how you wound up here? You know, you're a young guy. Like, I have interest in owning my own business. And so he agreed. We sat down for about an hour. He really just told me, you know, his story, everything about the business, answered all my questions. And at the end I said, hey, like, I'm interested in this. Do you think it would be helpful if I got a job at Chick-fil-A? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, will you give me a job? And he said, yes. And I just started as a regular team member. So like my first job was unloading truck. Now we have like all these guys who like unload it off the truck, they wheel it in, and then we just have to put it away. But back then, you know, I was like hauling everything inside. But like I loved doing it. I was scrubbing the toilet, doing whatever. But it was so much fun because that experience you see on the outside, it was really like that internally. And if you guys have ever worked in food service or even in just some other service jobs, you'll see like a lot of okay service, guest facing and things like that. But then behind the scenes, it can be a kind of a rough environment. And so I loved it. And even though I had other jobs that I worked in the summer where I was a little bit higher up, I always kept that job throughout the year. So I got an opportunity to do an internship for Patrick. And then when it was coming time to graduate, so I graduated in 3.5 years. I was a double major. I was going to be graduating in December, getting married in February. And I talked to Patrick. I said, hey, is this something that you think I have a legitimate shot at? He said yes. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go for this. So I'm sure my in-laws were super enthusiastic that their future son-in-law was going to pursue fast food coming out of college. But I went all in. And so I was loving it. Got an experience to go down to Chick-fil-A Inc. If you guys ever get an opportunity and you're in Atlanta, Georgia, definitely take the tour. But got to do some training down there and just saw how they treated their corporate employees. And it was very similar to how we were treated in the restaurant. And I just loved it. And I was like, I have got to be a part of this culture. So unfortunately, about a month after we returned from that, Patrick informed me that he was taking an opportunity with Chick-fil-A in Indianapolis. He was switching his franchise over, and it didn't make sense for my wife and I to move. And so at that point, I was like, that's okay. I'll go work for a different Chick-fil-A operator. All these people are, you know, great and amazing. And so I made the switch and worked for a different guy. I was actually at that first Chick-fil-A that I fell in love, you know what I mean, with the brand, with the food, with how I was, you know, treated there. And I was hoping to work my way up there. But what I found was, you know, Ken was in a really different life stage. He wasn't as developmentally focused. And I was not making the progress that I thought, you know, that I would. And I was like, well, if I can't be an owner operator, I'm not sure that, you know what I mean, this is going to be for me long term. And it was about that time my wife worked for First Energy, and they announced that they were going to be doing some layoffs in 2012. And so she had applied in Findlay at Marathon, where her sister worked. And my sister-in-law was like, Paul, if Ann gets a job, it'd be a great opportunity. They hire spouses all the time. So I was like, oh, of course, this would be great. I'll just make the corporate jump. No big deal. I mean, I was a little bit brokenhearted about it. But so Ann ended up getting an opportunity, my wife, and we moved out here. And I was like, yep, I'm going to be able to, you know what I mean, just make that corporate jump. And that just never materialized. I interviewed for a few positions, didn't get them. So that was just a stay-at-home trophy husband. I tell people, I don't know how good-looking of a trophy I was, but I tried to do my best. And then shortly thereafter, I was just tired of sitting at home, so I got a part-time job at the Menards down the road on Tiffin Avenue, just to like maybe improve my manly skills. I don't know, how much that rubbed off on me, but I did get a lot of splinters in my hands, so that was an experience. So shortly after that, I ended up getting an opportunity with Speedway as a district manager trainee, and it was a tough role. It was very different environment from Chick-fil-A, obviously. You know what I mean? The gas station world can be a little rough at times. And so that was kind of an interesting thing to go through. I would get up and I'd be in the store by like 5 or 6 a.m., depending on which location I was at, training. I tell everyone like I was scrubbing toilets and selling candy bars 2 for $2.50. And my wife's like leaving after me, getting home before me. She's talking about corporate time and stretching. And I was really like, man, like God, like this is not what I worked for. Like what is going on? And, I think I talked about this at the meeting with all the youth pastors. It was a really tough time in life. And I was really just like, I know that God is sovereign and he is in control, but it did not make the reality of what was going on at the time any easier. And I told my wife, like, this is not what we planned for. Ultimately she wanted to stay home when we had kids, and we were definitely not on that track at that point. So fast forward, it took 1.5 years to get through the training program. They end up placing me in Newark and Zanesville, Ohio, which required a move. My wife was working 3 desks down from her sister. I was disappointing the in-laws again by taking their daughter away from the other daughter. And they were like, why would you guys make this move? My wife was making way more money than me. It just like on the surface didn't make sense. But my wife was faithful to, what the plan was. And she really thought, hey, this will work out in the long haul. And so we moved down to Columbus. And about 6 months after that, Patrick, my old boss, calls me and he said, hey, that town that you said would be great for a Chick-fil-A, Findlay, Ohio. He's like, they're on the map. And I think with everything you've been doing, you know what I mean? You might have a shot. So that would have been 2015, like September of 2015. And so I applied and started through the interview process. And I'm sure you guys have maybe looked up about that, but it's a pretty rigorous process. I think the year I applied, they had about 35 to 40,000 people apply. I think now like 100,000 people who apply. They take less than 100 external candidates every single year. So, I mean, it's just, a lot of people really going for this. And so it was 2.5 months, 11 different interviews. Some were, phone calls, some were flying down there. At one point, I was about a year in the process at this point, and I interviewed for a mall location in Springfield, Missouri, which is about as far away as you could get without flying. It's like 6.5 hours away. And we were fully prepared to take the opportunity. And I didn't even get that. So in my mind, I was running $100 million Speedway district. And they're like, hey, you're not even qualified to run this mall unit. That wasn't some big time operation. And I was just like, I am such a failure. And I was so disappointed. So time continues for another year. They end up actually swapping who was in charge of selections. And this new lady, Mandy, came on, and we had a meeting in Columbus, our first meeting, and it was just the best meeting we had. There was this local restaurant in kind of a rough area where I'd kind of made a connection with the owner there. He was really just like a great guy. It's actually called Flavor 91 Bistro, named after the 91st Psalm. And it's amazing. If you're ever in Whitehall, Ohio, highly recommend the restaurant. But it was amazing. He was being my hype man to this new lady. And so she loved it. We totally hit it off. And then after that, at the end of the interview, they said, hey, Paul, we feel like you were really relaxed, but we really want to ask you a question. Would you rather have a restaurant now or wait a year or a few years for an opportunity to get a restaurant in Ohio? And I said, hey, honestly, I'm an Ohio guy. I'd rather wait. I'd rather bet on myself, because ultimately, while I'd be grateful for any opportunity, my long-term goal is to, really be able to unite my family and be where we want to be. So finish up that interview, and then shortly thereafter get a call, just typical Chick-fil-A, and they said, hey, Paul, we want to interview you. We have 2 malls we're placing. We have 4 candidates. One is for Davenport, Iowa. You've probably never heard of that. And Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I was like, okay, that doesn't really match up with what the conversation we just had, but I was, again, grateful for the opportunity. So I go down, have another great interview, and then actually went on vacation directly after that. So I was feeling really good. So shortly after that one, I get a call, and they're like, hey, the interviews went really well, but we want to go back to that previous question. Did you want an opportunity now? Or there was an Ohio State inline store opening up on High Street in Columbus, and then Findlay, Ohio. And I said, hey, if you think I'd be a good fit, then I'd rather go for those Ohio locations. So she says, okay, I'm going to put you down for that. So the first one I interviewed for actually was the Ohio State inline location. I actually was pretty keen on staying in Columbus at the time. It was just, it was familiar. And I was like, I don't know if I want to go back to the scene of my biggest failure. And so I go to interview for this, and it was the worst interview I ever had. They actually forgot me at the airport. Like, usually they're there, they have a driver, they pick you up, everything's great. And I'm waiting there for like a half hour. So finally I call, and some guy's like, hey, like, you're lucky. Like, no one's actually in this office today. I was just walking by. I said, well, you guys forgot me at the airport. So they obviously were sorry, and they came and picked me up, and everything was great. And then they had very specific questions. And prior to that, it was really just get to know you type of things. And so, like, in my mind, I completely bombed this interview. It was horrible. I was like, wow. I was feeling really good going into it. I'm like, wow, 2 great opportunities, and I'm going to probably get, whichever one. So that ends, and 2 weeks later, I get a call, and Mandy says, hey, Paul, we had our interview. We don't know who's going to get that Ohio State store. We just know it's not going to be you. Oh, and by the way, we're going to count that one for the Findlay location as well. And I'm like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, I would be more than happy to come back down again. And they're like, no, that's fine. And so she said, hey, I want to schedule time to come out with your wife. And so that was at the end of November in 2017. And so I'm sweating it out. There was actually a guy here locally. I think he lived in Ada, Ohio, who I talked to, Garrett Fleming. And I know he interviewed for the location as well, because we had met on a previous time down at the support center, because he was interviewing through the process. So I knew he went and interviewed for it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had this terrible interview. This guy's super great. He'd be great at this. I'm like, I'm going to end up getting neither of these. And so the end of November comes around, and Mandy comes and meets with my wife, and it was just casual small talk. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're just going to reject me right here in front of my wife. It'll be total humiliation. And then at the end of that, they were like, hey, Paul, we want to make you the lead candidate for Findlay. So that was like a huge relief. And then January 25th of 2018, I was selected as the operator for Findlay, Ohio. And it was just like so incredible to look at how God worked through every single part of that process, right? Mm-hmm. If I never worked for Chick-Fil-A out of college, I probably would not have been in that position to do that. That year that I felt I had wasted and been a failure. If we didn't move to Findlay, Ohio, where in my mind I fell flat on my face, I wouldn't have gotten this opportunity. If I had gotten that corporate job at Marathon and didn't get that leadership experience, I would not be in this opportunity. And so it's just so amazing to look how God uses our quote unquote failures and totally turns them on our head. And I just remember just being overwhelmed with emotion about how God's plan is so much better. If I had tried to write a book about it, obviously not many people would read it, because from a book standpoint, that's not that interesting. But from a life perspective, like, it would not have turned out as well. There was so much suspense and drama. And God took a 21, 22-year-old guy who would not have been a great leader in this business, and really allowed me to be refined and learn a lot of different things. To be able to come back much older, much wiser. Hey, and I still definitely have a long way to go on that. But now I look at being able to take this opportunity to be settled here, to not have to continue to move around from a career perspective. We had our son in April of 2018, right before the restaurant opened up. My nephew, who lives here in town, was born the year before, and they get to grow up together. So it really fulfilled my wife's dream. It fulfilled my dream. And it's like, God is so much better than even our own heart and our own mind and our own plans. And it's just incredible to see that, Yeah, it was a crazy story. And then obviously we open up, you guys know that everyone was super excited for us to come here. We actually broke the record for busiest grand opening in the history of Ohio by like 40%. It was since broken by Sandusky, but I tell everyone, inflation adjusted, we still
That's
have.
not fair. Well, did they get to open up during the pandemic? Because that's not fair. Everybody's going out to eat.
No, it was actually right before the pandemic. So
well, they were prepping. They just didn't know
it. Exactly. But Dave does a great job up there. So if someone beat me, I'm happy that it was. But it's just been such an incredible experience to return to Findlay. Yeah. It's just such a great place to live and to spend time with people, to grow and develop. You know what I mean? The kids here, it's really been amazing.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story, and it is remarkable. Just kind of I've experienced a similar arc in my life where you kind of start in some ways kind of start here and then you go somewhere else and you think things are going to happen in one way and then somehow find yourself back in a place that's and it's where God had been preparing you to come back and to do these things. I love how much you've talked about your faith in the middle of this, and I think that's one of the things that sets Chick-fil-A apart in a lot of people's minds is the idea that there is a faith factor to kind of the business model, and just the way. What I appreciate is not just mentioning that, hey, there's a faith factor to all of this, but then the way that it's lived out, the way that you don't just say it, like you experience it. The experience that people have when they come is just probably one of the best, I think, customer service experiences that you can have. So can you just talk about why do you find that to be such an important thing, and how do you kind of foster that environment?
Yeah, so the last part of that question, how do we foster that environment? Chick-fil-A really makes it easy, right? When I talk about this with people, it would be if this were Paul's Chicken Shack, the experience just wouldn't be the same, even if we had all the same employees, because everyone or most people who come to work here have had that Chick-fil-A experience. And a lot of the kids who come here say, like, I want to be that Chick-fil-A person, right? And so it's so much easier when they've experienced it to have them come in and be like, hey, I always ask them when they say, like, hey, I really want to be that Chick-fil-A person, or you guys are always so nice. I say, can you be that, right? And so they understand the standards and they understand what we're trying to achieve from that feeling and that service. And I think why it works for Chick-fil-A is it's so foreign now. We're in such a selfish, self-serving world. And like even at your finest 5-star restaurants, you just don't get that feeling of genuine service. But because Chick-fil-A has cultivated that culture, it's a lot easier for people to come alongside of that and to kind of achieve those of falling in line and serving people well. And that is the biggest differentiating factor for us. Is it really becomes not an act. People were famous for my pleasure. Truett actually, the founder of Chick-fil-A, actually stole that from the Ritz-Carlton. So the Ritz-Carlton will say my pleasure when people say thank you. And he said, and he was visiting one time and he said, you know what, why can't we do that? We're in food service, but why could we not bring that experience? And so we talk a lot about elevated language, right? And so instead of just saying, you're good or you're welcome, it's my pleasure. Instead of saying, what can I get you to drink, which we're not always the best at, but we say beverage. It's about creating that elevated experience. And because people don't get that anywhere else, for the most part in society, it's just so welcoming and they love it. And as you can see from our drive-through line, it's always super long. People appreciate that. A lot of different, franchisees and things, if you read publications in the food world, they really want to push automation because the job market is so tough. And while the job market is tough, it's tough to find great team members. I don't ever want to replace people with machines because that's the differentiating factor, right? Our people is our secret to success. You see I'm sure you guys have seen the chicken sandwich wars. Oh, yeah. Everyone's coming out with a chicken sandwich. A lot of those are good. I've had them. Anyone could come in tomorrow and make a better chicken sandwich, but it's hard to day in and day out replicate people caring, people serving, because that takes effort and it takes culture. So I wish I could tell you I have like there's some secret training manual, and in fact, Chick-fil-A, you think because of the consistent experience that there are like just, hey, they give you a training manual and this is what you execute. But like while we have training resources, I've actually found it's been one of the most challenging things is actually getting a good training plan in place, because all we have is, you know, videos to train on specific positions or things like that. But there's no like, okay, today you're going to learn the secret to success. Right. There's not that. There's no manual.
It seems like it's kindness.
So that's
really, it's kindness, it's politeness, it's, you know, it is kind of following that formula.
You did mention your drive-through, and there was something I learned at our pastor's meeting about your drive-through. I mean, even though the line is really long, it's exceptionally fast. I think you said your drive-through is in the top, was it 20%?
We were actually, for most of last year, we were in the top 20 in the entire chain of Chick-fil-A. So 2,500 restaurants, probably about 2,000 freestanding units, which would be places with drive-through. For most of last year, we were able to achieve that. And so that's kind of an aggregate score. So that's not just like sales dollars. It's sales dollars, transactions, customer perception of speed, your carryout percentage, and then order accuracy. So there's 5 things that are included in that. And it's your ranking within all of those. It's your aggregate ranking is how you're ranked. And so we obviously, competing with stores in California, New York, Chicago, we don't have the volume of a lot of other stores, but we have performed at a high level to where in some of those other metrics we're high enough to achieve that. We've fallen a little bit. Our accuracy over the last 2 months has struggled. So if you come and haven't gotten fries, I apologize for that. We definitely make that right. And hopefully we'll get back there. My goal for this year is to be able to hit the number 1 spot for at least a little period of time.
That was important for me to know, though, because a lot of people my age will, if you see an outrageous line,
get in.
You're not going to stop. But after I listened to you, my wife and I were going down and we saw a really long line at Chick-fil-A. And I said, I'm going to stop. And she said, no, don't stop. It
just moves.
I said, no, they're super freaky fast.
Yeah.
And so we pulled in, and it was like 3 minutes later we had our food.
Barely tap your brake going through. Yeah.
So you guys have that down to a science.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things that I appreciate about Chick-fil-A, about you, about what you all do, is that it is one of those places that feels like it can be a positive part of your day, just like a mundane thing, just your lunch, your dinner, a snack, whatever. It can be I'm almost guaranteed like there's just a little bit of light, a little bit of that was nice, you know, and you don't always get that in every part of your day. So I appreciate that. And I think that is, I mean, we're pastors. I think that's a great witness, that people can know that I can go there. I can be a part of that. And yeah, you're not a church or whatever, but come on, it's Jesus' chicken. And so like, I think that there is a part of that that's a witness. Have you kind of experienced that?
Yeah, so that's what we actually had someone who would come in and be like, hey, like, I went to this other Chick-fil-A and they had Bible verses on the wall in the bathroom, and like, you need to do that. Like, why don't you do that? You hate Jesus. And I'm like, that's not what we're doing. I said, like, our witness is to serve others well, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I have many employees who are not Christians, right? And that's okay. I actually had one, a family member ask me, they said, hey, like, how do you hire all of these good Christian kids? I said, well, that's not a question I can ask, and it's also not what I want to do, right? And so I talked about this at the Refuel Network. Like, yes, I want to have great young kids who can impact people for the kingdom ultimately, but like, our witness is going to be in how we treat people. We're not going to shy away from having those conversations, right? But our witness is ultimately that we are different and that we treat other people differently. And I think that you experience that when you come into Chick-fil-A. I mean, Chick-fil-A gets a lot of slack for being, anti-LGBT and things like that. But I would tell anyone, hey, anyone is welcome to come into our restaurant, and we will treat you well. Right? I think Jesus would treat all people well, and so that's what we're going to do. We will treat people well. We're not discriminating against anyone. We want everyone to feel welcome. I want everyone to get that experience that I got, right? That little vacation experience, the experience you talked about, that Monday where your day is just brighter, and then to be like, why is that? And really learn about Truett Cathy and why we do the things that we do. What motivates, Chick-fil-A Inc. What motivates Paul Hattie and the team at Chick-fil-A Findlay. I think you guys have all been through and met Susan in drive-through. She's like basically the mayor of the town. But everyone loves Susan. So she was our dining room lady forever, and like everyone loved her. I mean, I tell people all the time, I said, if I leave tomorrow, totally fine. Like people, a few people will miss me, but if Susan ever leaves, we're going to have problems on our hands. So she's out there now, delivering meals to people and just making their days and making those experiences. And that is really just such a strong testament to be able to treat people well in an environment where people aren't used to be treated well.
All right, we're going to get you out of here on this one last question. I know that Chick-fil-A is a very positive place, but there is one thing that I've seen that's brought a lot of contention for people with Chick-fil-A, and that's a debate over which sauce is the best. You have several sauces. I personally, I'm a Chick-fil-A sauce guy, just the straight up Chick-fil-A sauce. I'm told, rumor has it, that it's harvested straight from angel's tears. But I'm not asking you to confirm or deny that. What is your favorite of the Chick-fil-A sauces?
I am like just a plain Jane kind of guy, full disclosure. I stick to barbecue. However, I will say, if I had to pick which two are the best, one or two is the best, it definitely has to come down between Polynesian and Chick-fil-A sauce. I don't eat them personally, but like I cannot deny when you have this business and people are demanding Chick-fil-A sauce, I mean, you just have to admit the sauce has to be great. Like it's not for me. My brother, I mean, he can almost uncomfortable to a degree. And now actually they sell it in like the squirt bottles for like $1.19. And eventually those will actually be on the shelves at Walmart. And fun story about that. If you ever purchase those at retail, and I think even in the restaurant, all the proceeds from those actually go to Chick-fil-A's scholarship fund, which they give a lot of team member scholarships. I think we had 6 winners last year.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's got to be Chick-fil-A sauce. Polynesian sauce is probably 1A on that.
Yep. Gotcha. Appreciate you being on with us today. And thanks for everything you do for our community.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, gentlemen. Anytime.
All right. Take care.
See ya.
Bye.
Okay, so he passed the test because you said thank you.
And he said,
it was my pleasure.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Very good. What's your favorite Chick-fil-A sauce?
Cane's.
Oh, I'm so glad he's already signed off.
No, that was just that was just a joke.
That's really funny.
I really don't put on.
You're not a sauce guy?
No, on my sandwich I just put a little bit of mayo.
A little mayo. James?
Yeah.
Do you have a Chick-fil-A sauce preference?
Honey mustard.
Honey mustard. Very good. I'm down with the honey mustard. I like.
Here's when I became a Chick-fil-A fan, though, because we'd always had them in the malls around our house in Northeast Ohio. But there was a guy coming. He has national recognition for youth workers, and he was coming to our Chick-fil-A here in Findlay, and he was going to buy us lunch and all this stuff, and I took my invitation in, and I was under the assumption like we were supposed to go get our lunch and then like join, and I thought I was just the first guy there. And they had no idea what I was talking about. And they had no idea what I was talking about because they were catering our lunch for us. But still, they still
just took care of you.
Felt bad about the confusion, which was totally my fault.
Yeah, it's just, oh, sorry, I'm an idiot.
Yeah, and they just, they turned that all around.
That's great.
Yeah.
I like that. The Chick-fil-A that was by our house, I forget which place we were. Anyway, they had a thing where if you dress like a cow, you got free food. And I was like, I will dress like a cow. That is fine.
Our staff actually took a trip to Arizona for a conference at one point. And it was this amazing trip because right over our, here's our hotel, and looking right out our window was the Padres training facility.
Ooh.
So we were watching spring baseball.
Love that.
All we wanted to.
I love baseball.
And there was a Chick-fil-A right outside, and it was getting ready for its grand opening. And I said, you know what would make this, awesome is if that grand opening happened tomorrow. Guess what? We walked out that morning. Oh, God heard our prayers. It was opened.
That's how you open a Chick-fil-A, by the way. You just pray about it.
Yeah. We had free Chick-fil-A. It was pretty awesome.
Hey, just so you guys know, Tina Miller says Chick-fil-A sauce is her favorite.
Chick-fil-A sauce? Hey, I'm with you on. I like the Chick-fil-A sauce quite a bit. I've had the Polynesian sauce. I also like it very much. However, I will say it's just not. It's not what my palate's used to. But it's a little sweeter than what I would normally have. But I like it. I do like it.
See, Paul came to our refuel meeting, and what he was looking for is, if you guys work with kids, if there's names of good kids you can drop,
send them our way. Yep.
Send them our way. But then he also noticed there were more people showing up because we were eating together.
Yeah.
So he's offered to feed us every week.
That's great.
Even going to come to our meetings, which I think is awesome. He's going to invest in kids.
Yeah, I mean, he does. He really does.
I did try one of the sauces last time I was there, and it was pretty good. I don't remember what kind it was, though.
All right. So I want to transition because we're getting short on time, but this is I wanted to ask you about this today. Here's our theological discussion. Not that Chick-fil-A isn't theological, but it's not. He mentioned Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know if you saw the news, but there was something that for especially Southern Baptists was big news yesterday.
Okay, I did not see it.
Okay. Beth Moore.
Okay.
You know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
Beth Moore. Famous Bible study teacher in the Southern Baptist Church. Came out yesterday and said that she no longer considers herself a Southern Baptist. Like she's kind of rejecting the Southern Baptist denomination. And a lot of her reasoning was around the fact that Southern Baptists are still what they would say it's complementarian, meaning women are supposed to be complementary to the men who actually preach. The preaching voice is supposed to be male. And so, she had not only had she had some, the reality is she fills arenas and she's teaching. She's preaching.
Right.
And there were a lot of people who were just kind of against that. Like, sorry, you can't do that. But it was undeniable. Whether or not you're a big fan of all of it, she's helped a lot of people grow closer to Jesus, and that's a beautiful thing. So I found it kind of fascinating and where she was thinking she may end up landing. And where she said she may end up landing is not the Methodist Church, but the Anglican Church, which is very closely related to the Methodist Church. We're not super far off. I guess I found it interesting.
Well, we kind of branched off from them.
We did. We branched off from John Wesley was Anglican, and now here we are. And we're back into I think we're in full communion now with the Anglicans. I could pastor an Anglican church. They could pastor a Methodist church.
And the Episcopalian,
Anglican, all kind of.
And the Moravians.
And the Moravians. You know who else we're in full communion with is the Lutherans.
So I was just going to say somebody new this year.
Yeah. So, but So I found that interesting. I guess we don't even. For me, I have never been in a place where there was an issue with whether or not women could preach. My mom's a pastor, right? Now, she started... I didn't grow up as a pastor's kid. She started after I did. But, I mean, when she said she was... I was like, well, yeah, of course, you know. That's kind of what you do. Have you ever been in a place or where there were questions about whether or not women should be allowed to preach?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I would say that when I first came to St. Mark's, which was the end of the 90s, right around 2000, there was a contingent that felt like, you know, women shouldn't be pastors. But here's the thing. I have friends who are pastors and who are women who have experienced.
Yeah.
And there's actually, it might be on YouTube, but it's a whole collection of women's.
It's from the North Carolina annual conference. A bunch of guys reading things that were sent to women pastors.
Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you would not believe that. And this is just like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And you would not, and these are Methodist pastors. Mm-hmm. And you would not believe some of the stuff that.
Yeah.
And I can say there at least is one friend I know who wasn't really taken seriously for a while, because of just being a woman.
And maybe it's a generational thing, or maybe it's just where I've been. I don't know. Like for me, that's never even been something in my mind that why she couldn't, or what. Like that's just never been on my mind. And I understand that some people read some of Paul's writings in that way, but I mean, I could. If you want to get in a theological debate about it, I mean, I'll come at you, because there's so much in Scripture about all of the women that have been very clearly called by God to do various things and to preach in various ways and to teach and to be prophets and all of these other situations. So to me, I personally, there's no debate. And a part of what's had this on my mind is, one, everything happening with Beth Moore, and it will be very interesting to see what happens to the Southern Baptist Church and with the Southern Baptist Church in this, because for a lot of people, especially women, Beth Moore, like, their allegiance is more to her than to that denomination. Just telling you.
We used to jokingly call her the Apostle Beth Moore.
Oh, yeah.
She does have a big following.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, rightfully so.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Rightfully so. And, you know, and I don't think it's gone to, from my knowledge of her, which is, I'll admit is limited, doesn't seem to have gone to her head. You know, she's one of the teachers today that most of her studies are geared towards women specifically. But the things that I've read, and it's pretty solid, and I tend to buy most of it.
I've sat through some of her.
Yeah. I mean, I've never come across a pastor or a teacher that I've agreed with 100%. Just haven't found it, except for Jesus. He's pretty good.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions for him. But so anyway, I'm interested to see how that goes. But also, a thing is happening here where for the very first time in the Northwest Plains, we are going to have a district superintendent who is not a white male. Amy Haynes is going to be our new district superintendent.
I did not know that
July.
would be a first time.
First time. It's always been a white male around here. So there are, and I don't want to say I'm ignorant to the fact that for some people this is still an issue, especially I think in some older and maybe more conservative generations. You know, that's something they're not accustomed to, or maybe even okay with. she's going to be our boss. It's like
Well, we've had a woman bishop.
Yeah.
And actually, the bishop now for East Ohio is a woman.
So it'll all be very interesting, and I guess to any clergy sisters who happen to be watching this, I'm sorry that you all still experience this, and I know it's my own ignorance, and everything that I've never personally experienced, that, but I'm a white dude, and it's pretty easy for me for the most part, especially in white churches and. In country Ohio, it's pretty easy.
You know what's funny is I would say that most of the biblical studies I've ever had, most of the classes have been women.
Is that right?
Yep, I would say the majority, maybe just a little over half. So I've always had a great rapport with classmates and things who have.
Right. Well, and what's interesting to me is, so, I've been on the board of ordained ministry, and I don't want to beat this horse to death, but, so we have people come and say, hey, this is what I feel like God's called me to. This is how I feel God is calling me into ministry in one way or another. And I think so often we put our own, what does it say about us when we put our own either biases or even interpretations of Scripture ahead of the calling of the Holy Spirit? I mean, if the Holy Spirit's calling a person, okay, what do I do with that? I can't say, sorry, God, you didn't read the Bible right. I mean, which is essentially what I think sometimes people are doing. It's like, sorry, God, sorry, what you are trying to do doesn't fit with my definition of things. And I think that that's problematic.
Yeah, I like to say, and it kind of along the same line, whenever I've been asked, well, do you think it's okay for so-and-so to preach, or you think so-and-so made it to heaven, or, that kind of thing. I always say, and I'll tell people flat out, this is not a cop-out. And I know that's where you're going to think that I'm copping out, but that's not my job to figure that out. And thank God it's not my job.
No,
and
exactly.
I think it's an affront to God when we make that assumption of who he's going to use or how he's going to use them.
Well, I always think of in Acts, like I go back to the story of when it started off with, it was Jews who could be Christians. The Gentiles, the pagans, they weren't in, right? And then Peter goes to Cornelius's house, and the Holy Spirit comes upon them. Like, God's Holy Spirit comes upon these people. And he goes back to the apostles like, so I baptized him. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Tell the Holy Spirit he's wrong? Like, sorry, Holy Spirit, they're not Jewish. I can't do this, And everybody's response was, oh, awesome. Yeah. That's great. And why would we not do the same thing today when there's evidence that the Holy Spirit, that God is working in people, that why wouldn't we say, hey, right on. God's opened it up to things beyond what our own limited understanding could imagine. How cool is that? So anyway, it will be interesting to watch that. I'm hopeful and in prayer for my brothers and sisters who happen to be Southern Baptists. I know several, that this isn't something that becomes so contentious that it damages someone's faith or witness. And I'm hopeful for Beth Moore. There's room at the Methodist table. I'm just saying, Beth, come on in.
Come on over.
Come on over.
Come on our show.
I think that's James playing us off.
Yes. I think you're saying all right.
We are getting to that point.
I started out as a worship leader for a Southern Baptist church.
Is that right?
Yeah.
See, there's room
East Hill.
There's room for even Baptists can get saved.
And not that I'm going to go off on a long tangent, but I did have a unique experience remember last year when I took some time off and I led a group on a mission trip in Toronto. They were Southern Baptists, so that was pretty funny to watch the kids walk down the street and something inappropriate would And guys, hide your eyes.
Oh yeah.
It was a trip.
All right, things coming up next week, God willing. Adam Hamilton will be our guest, so be here with us for that. Continuing to do church at 9 o'clock for traditional service, 11:15 for contemporary. I have Holy Week services that are going to be coming up before too long, end of the month. Maundy Thursday service at 7 o'clock in the sanctuary, and that'll be a great time together. The Good Friday service, I think we decided today is going to be from 6 to 7:30. We'll have some sign-ups available for that. It's going to be more of, it's not so much a service as a walk through individual things.
Yes.
You'll like
Stations
it.
of the Cross.
Stations of the Cross. We'll just call it that. And then Easter will be, again, 9:30 or 9 o'clock and 11:15. We're going to try to live stream both of those. So we don't always live stream the traditional service, but we'll try to do that on Easter so that everybody can catch that. So I think that's it. Anything else?
No.
Be in prayer for Corinne. It may or may not be baby time right now. Who knows what's going on?
Yep.
She's been pregnant for, I think, 3 years. So it's
Now
about
would be
time.
the appropriate time to use the term Braxton Hicks, right?
But they're hopefully not Braxton Hicks contractions,
Yes.
which are false contractions.
Yes, but it's also not a
And you're still,
gifts assessment either.
if you're an avid church chat watcher, you know that we were trying to talk about the Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
And I think you called it the Braxton Hicks, which are false labor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I got
Different
called
thing.
out on the show, so we're good.
Different thing. Well, I'm happy to do it again. So, all right. Thank you guys so much for being here with us today. James is going to try to play us out with our theme song on his keyboard. What is the tone you have the keyboard set to? You had something frog earlier.
Yeah, like a heavenly frog. I don't know. They all have names.
They all have weird names.
I can't even. Let's see if I can see what this is. This one is aptly named E Piano.
E piano. All right.
Maybe I should try something else.
That sounds boring, but you do whatever you want to do.
Let's try EP10 Piano Harpsy.
I'm excited.
See what that
That sounds
sounds
harpsichordy. Ooh. Let's do it.
Sounds like a Casio keyboard from like.
Yeah.
It does a little bit. It does.
Well,
All
let's
right.
find out.
Thank you all so much for being here. James, play us out.
Boom.
It's church chat with pastors Dan and Dave.
There it is.
Come hang
Sounds like he's running a
out
tech
our stream. It's church chat Wednesday.
Wow. Awesome. See you guys later.
I
Take
went
care.
through years of schooling to learn how to do that. It was all worth it. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.